Hey, Torah students, welcome to Precept Steps, January 3rd, 2026, as we continue to pursue the commands and the precepts and the statutes of Yahweh. We're seeking them diligently. This Torah portion is called Vayechi, and it is what the word means is, and he lived. So we're opening the this Torah portion with Jacob and his life, and how long he has lived to this point, and also how long he continues to live in Egypt. So what we know is that after his reunion with Joseph in the land of Egypt, Jacob stands in front of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says to him, "How old are you?" And Jacob replies, "The time of my stay on earth has been 130 years. And then we're told later in the same chapter that Jacob, or Yaakov, lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. Thus, Yaakov lived to be 147 years old. So most of this Torah portion is about Jacob, and his last days with his sons in Egypt, and what he says and what he does. One of the first things that we see Yaakov, or Jacob, do as he senses that the end of his life is coming close, he says to Joseph, "I need to talk to your two sons. Bring your two sons to me." Now, these sons are mentioned in the previous Torah portion in Genesis chapter 41. And it says, Joseph called the firstborn Manasseh, which means causing to forget, because God has caused me to forget all the troubles I suffered at the hands of my family. And the second one he called Ephraim, which means fruit or fruitful, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my misfortune. So Joseph brings these two sons to Yaakov. And Yaakov says to Joseph, "I'm going to adopt them." What he actually says is, "Now your two sons, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt." Okay? So these two boys were born before Jacob came, and in fact, the Bible tells us that they were born during the 7 years of plenty. They are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be as much mine as Reuben and Shimon are. Okay, Reuben and Simeon. Interesting that he chose these two sons to compare the boys to, because Reuben is his firstborn and Simeon is his secondborn. And this is going to play out and be very important as we go through the blessings of the sons. Now, Yaakov does kind of a strange thing here. He, when he goes to bless the boys, normally his right hand would be on the older son, and the left hand on the younger son. But Yaakov purposely crosses his hands so that his right hand is on the younger boy, on Ephraim. And Joseph protests, and he says, "Father, no, you're doing it wrong." And Yaakov says, "No, I know, Joseph, I understand what you're saying, but it has to be this way. I know. Because God has told me that this is how it must be." So the greater blessing, both boys are blessed with abundance and with many nations and many people coming from them. But Yaakov says Ephraim will be greater. Now, I want to talk about this picture a little bit before we go on. Looks like the boys are maybe 10, 12 years old, maybe. And we've talked before about this, how pictures can sometimes be deceiving. So let's think about this a little bit. We know that the two boys, both of them, Manasseh and Ephraim, were born during the 7 years of plenty. So somewhere in that 7-year period, they were born. And then in Genesis 45, chapter 45 and verse 6, Joseph is speaking to his brothers, and he says, "The famine has been over the land for the last 2 years, and for yet another 5 years there will be neither plowing nor harvest." So by the time Jacob comes down to Egypt, The 7 years of plenty has gone by, and another 2 years of famine, so 9 years. And then we are told that Jacob lived another 17 years in Egypt. So if he is near death, and if Manasseh was born in the first year of plenty, then Manasseh is 26 years old. Now let's suppose maybe he was born in the third year of the famine. That still makes him 24 years old. These boys are not young children. They are entering into manhood, probably in their early 20s. So just to be careful, let be lesson to you to be careful when you're looking at pictures of things, that they do not lead you astray into things that are not true. The next scene we see, we're told that Yaakov is very near death now, and he calls for his sons. He wants to speak to them. In Genesis 49, verses 1 and 2, then Yaakov called for his sons and said, gather yourselves together, and I will tell you what will happen to you. In the Aharik Hayayim, assemble yourselves and listen. Sons of Yaakov, pay attention to Israel, your father. Okay. Aharik Hayamim means last days. Now, some people think this is just days to come. Other people think it means the very last days, the last days before Yeshua comes back. And we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through the blessings. So Yaakov says, hey, guys, listen up. Come close. Listen up. I'm going to tell you some stuff, and it's important about what's going to happen to you and what's going to happen to the tribes, to your descendants. And so then he proceeds to go through the sons one by one. So Yaakov begins by addressing his firstborn son, Reuben, or Reuven. And what Reuven means, see a son, which is what Leah, his mother, named him, because she was so happy when he was born, and that she was able to have a son. And there's his name in Hebrew. See, the first letter there is a resh. So we know this is Reuben. You haven't studied resh yet, so we won't spend too much time on that. But I'd pay attention to the Hebrew letters and try to understand a little bit, if you can, about the letters and what they sound like. Yaakov's got some problems with Reuben. Reuben did a terrible crime many years ago, and Yaakov has not forgotten. And then when they were debating about Benjamin going down to Egypt, Reuben said to his fathers, I will take the boy, I will take Benjamin down to Egypt, and if I don't bring him back, you can kill my 2 sons. Yaakov's not impressed with this. It's like, really, Reuben? If you fail in your duties, you're not going to pay the price. Your sons are going to pay the price. Yaakov finds Reuben, because of these 2 things, this crime and that he did, and his cavalier attitude about his sons. He says, Reuben, you're not leadership material. You're not going to be able to lead the clan. Now remember the right of the firstborn. We talked about this all the way back with Jacob and Esau. That there are 2 things now that the patriarchs are handing down to their sons. And usually both of these things would go to the firstborn. The one is the stuff. Remember, the money? And generally the firstborn gets a double portion of the entire estate. All right, so he gets the stuff. He gets the money. He gets the respect of the clan. When the father passes, then that person becomes the leader of the tribe. But then there's also the covenant, the birthright covenant, which is carrying on the promises that were made to Abraham about how Abraham's descendants were going to become a great nation. Now, Esau should have inherited both of those blessings, but he sold the birthright for a bowl of soup, and then Jacob did deceive his father, and he got the second blessing also of the stuff, right? So Jacob has both of the blessings. He's saying to Reuben, you are unstable as water, which is constantly changing. You can't, you're just the worst. You can't lead the family. So you get neither blessing. Now, often a flower, you see a couple of symbols there. We can talk about the symbols for each of the tribes. And Reuben's is usually a flower, although not always. And I'm like, why does Reuben have a flower? Then I realized this flower is a flower of a particular plant. It's the flower of the mandrake plant. And there's a story that we didn't talk about, but there's a story where Reuben finds some mandrakes, and they were kind of prized plants. And so he brought them to his mother, Leah, and she was very pleased with it. So that's why he has that picture of the flowers of a mandrake. Next, Yaakov addresses the second and third born kind of together. Right? They're on two separate slides, but Simeon is the second born and Levi is the third born. And the things he says to them together. Simeon or Shimon means hearing. Think Shema. Okay, when we say the Shema, Hear, O Israel. Okay. And there is his name in Hebrew. And Jacob says, cursed be their anger, for it has been fierce. Their fury, for it has been cruel. This is most likely referring to another story that we didn't really talk about, but there was a time period where Shimon and Levi took offense of the men of Shechem. When they lived near Shechem, the men of, specifically one man in Shechem, did something that they thought was just awful. And so they kind of set him up, and then they went into the city and they killed them all. And Jacob wasn't very happy with them when they did that. He did not, I guess he did not think the offense deserved the death of every man in the city. But Levi and Shimon did go into Shechem, and they killed every man in that city. And that is why on Simeon's banner, there is a walled city. Going back to that incident at Shechem. Now remember that Yaakov is speaking to Simeon and Levi together. He addresses both of them at the same time. And in the last slide, we heard him say, your anger and your cruelty and your fury are very bad things. And then he further says, I will divide them, both of you, in Yaakov and scatter them in Israel. So we see this happen when they get to the promised land, after the Exodus and everything. When they get to the promised land and land is being portioned out to the tribes, Simeon is given a few cities, actually, smack dab in the middle of Judah. And most authors agree, most commentators agree, that Simeon was basically absorbed into Judah and have, for the most part, lost their identity as a tribe. Levi, at the incident of the golden calf, which we'll talk about several weeks from now, but they kind of redeemed themselves. And so God still says you're going to get scattered, but in a different way. And so they become the priesthood of all Israel, and they are scattered among all the tribes so that they can serve the needs of each tribe in instructing them in the ways of Yahweh. And so the picture that's on their banner is the ephod that the high priest wears, and each of those stones is a representative of one of the tribes of Israel. And we'll talk about that in several weeks from now. That's covered in a Torah portion. We'll talk about the ephod more. But Yaakov predicts this right here, many, many years before it happens. Judah then is the fourth born. And Yaakov has seen Judah change and grow and become the kind of man that he is comfortable leaving in charge of the family. In Hebrew, it's pronounced Yehuda, and it means praise. And there is the Hebrew spelling of Yehuda. Jacob says, your father's sons, your brothers, okay, will bow down before you. This is giving them the authority over the family. He is giving Judah the blessing of the firstborn. He is giving Judah the authority over the family. He says Yehuda is a lion's cub. This is where we get, remember that Yeshua is a descendant of in the tribe of Judah. And so this is where we get Lion of Judah when we're talking about Yeshua sometimes. And it says the scepter will not pass from Yehuda until Shiloh comes. And there's a lot of debate about exactly what Shiloh means, or as that which is perfect comes. My opinion, and I emphasize opinion, okay, my opinion is that it is referring to the second coming of Yeshua, not his first coming. I believe the scepter is still with Judah. However, this is the first mention of a king. Okay? When the covenants were made with Abraham and Isaac and Yaakov, it talked about a land. It talked about a people. This is the first time that anybody's mentioned a king coming from the line of Israel, the line of Abraham. Although there is kind of a hint at it that something was going to come from Abraham's generations that would bless the whole world. But this is the first actual flat-out mention of a king. So Judah is given the birthright of the covenant. Judah is going to carry forth the line of the Messiah. And he has been given authority over the tribe and over the nation of Israel. But he was not given the stuff. He was not given the blessing of the double portion and the stuff. Yaakov now moves through several sons fairly quickly. And he starts with Zebulun, which means living together. And it says that Zebulun will live at the seashore with ships anchoring along his coast. And this ends up being sort of true when land is apportioned out to Zebulun. That he has some coast on the Mediterranean Sea, I believe. But at any rate, this is the prediction and that Jacob makes about Zebulun, and so his banner generally portrays ships of some kind. Issachar is next, or Yissachar, which means hire or reward. And all he says is Issachar is a strong donkey. Now, some people might be offended at being called a donkey. They might think that's a derogatory term. We kind of equate donkeys with lower animals or beasts of burden and stubbornness, maybe. Some people will say stubborn as donkey or as a mule. But it is more likely that this was a compliment, that donkeys were very important in that culture. They did bear burdens, but they were just really an integral part of that culture and them being able to do their jobs and get their work done. So most commentators think that this was a compliment, that he's saying Issachar is strong and he helps. Yaakov next addresses his son Dan, and Dan means he judged. Very short Hebrew name spelling there of the name of Dan. And it says, Dan will judge his people, and Dan will be a viper on the road. This doesn't sound very complimentary and probably isn't. And we know that the tribe of Dan falls into a lot of idolatry later on after they go back to Canaan. And it may be indicating some of that. We also notice that Dan is not listed as a tribe as part of the 144,000 in Revelation. Not sure how that all fits together just yet, but something to think about. And so for Dan's banner, sometimes they will use scales, which is usually a symbol of justice. And the fact that his name means he judged, and the blessing from Jacob here also says he's going to judge his people. But sometimes the banner will be a snake. So that kind of varies a little bit and isn't always the same. Next up is Gad, and Gad means good fortune, and also very short Hebrew spelling there. Hopefully you recognize the Gimel and the Dalet. We've studied both of those. And then Yaakov says, raiders shall raid Gad, but he shall raid at their heels. So there's the idea that Gad is going to be involved in a lot of military actions, both being attacked and attacking. And so his banner is usually tents, as you see here, and not just any tents, but these are military in design. The next son is Asher, and Asher means happy, and there's a spelling in Hebrew. And Jacob says, Asher's food is rich. He will provide food fit for a king. And his banner usually features a tree, and it's not just any tree, but an olive tree. And probably alluding to the fact that Asher's land is in the most productive olive tree belt in Israel. A lot of times when somebody says food is rich, it refers to it being high in fat content, and olive oil was the main fat that would be used in the land of Israel. The next son that Jacob addresses is Naphtali, and his name means my wrestling, and there's a spelling in Hebrew. And Jacob says Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. So generally, Naphtali's banner is usually a deer of some kind. And this is a complementary blessing. A doe is considered a beautiful animal, and the bearing fawns indicates that Naphtali will have a significant number of people. Next, Yaakov addresses Joseph, or Yosef, and Yosef's name means may he add. And this is what he says of Yosef: a fruitful plant by a spring. His bow remained taut, and his arms were made nimble by the hands of the mighty one of Yaakov. Bless you with blessings from heaven above, blessings from the deep lying below, blessings of children. Head of Yosef on the brow of the prince among his brothers. This is the other part of the blessing of the firstborn is given to Yosef. And specifically, as we talked earlier in this lesson, on Manasseh and Ephraim. This is the double portion. Remember, we talked about the firstborn getting two portions of the stuff? Well, Yosef is receiving a double portion through Ephraim and Manasseh. And Jacob is calling him a prince among his brothers. So while Judah has the main authority and the scepter of the king, Joseph is also going to be very important as a leader in the tribe and in the nation of Israel. So, just to review, so we've got it. Judah gets the authority. Judah is going to carry forth the covenant, the seed. Joseph, through Ephraim and Manasseh, is going to carry forth the blessing of large numbers of people and wealth. Last is Benjamin, or Benjamin, which means son of the right hand, and there's the Hebrew spelling. Yaakov says this: Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring the prey, in the evening still dividing the spoil. So generally, Benjamin's banner is a wolf, a picture of a wolf in some form. Usually it's like howling. And the idea here is that Benjamin is going to be a clan of mighty warriors. And we kind of see this, the first king of Israel, King Saul, comes from the tribe of Benjamin. And King Saul and his son Jonathan and Jonathan's and his other sons kind of were renowned for being mighty in battle. So that might be one fulfillment of this, but there are probably others. That's just one example. But the idea is mighty warriors. After Yaakov finished blessing his sons, it says that he died. And it was kind of the idea that he died very, very shortly after this. It's previously recorded in Genesis 47, chapter 47, that when Israel was approaching death, he saw it coming close. He called for his son Joseph and said to him, "If you truly love me, pledge that out of consideration for me, you will not bury me in Egypt. Rather, when I sleep with my fathers, you are to carry me out of Egypt and bury me where they are buried," which would be the cave of Machpelah. He wants to be buried where Abraham is buried, and Sarah, and Isaac, and Rebekah. Okay? And Joseph tells him, "I will do as you have said." And Jacob's like, "Swear it to me." Joseph swore to his father that he would do that. And so the last part of Genesis records that Joseph kept his promise to his father, and that his sons carried him from Egypt back to Canaan, back to the cave of Machpelah, and buried him there. The Bible also records that there was an enormous number of people who went with this, who went along, both people of Israel and people of Egypt. Apparently, Jacob was highly respected in the land, and it says the people mourned for him greatly for many days. So that's how Genesis closes, with the sons carrying Jacob's body back to Canaan. There is a tradition that when people are going through the Torah, that when you complete a book of the Torah, as we have completed Genesis today, that they say this phrase: Hazak, Hazak, Venit Hazek. And what it means is be strong, and let us be strengthened. The Hebrew letter of the week is Het. And in the Paleo Hebrew, it was a picture of a wall or a fence, kind of means separation. And you can see there at the bottom how the letter has changed over the centuries until we have the modern Hebrew form. In the top center there, the fancy form, and then the more manual form if you're writing the letters by hand. And you keep in mind that every letter has a numerical value, and the numerical value of Het is 8. 8's a very important number, and it usually means a new beginning. So the Het makes kind of a hard CH sound, like at the end of lock or bach. Kind of like, so it happens that the name for a donkey, which remember which tribe the donkey went with? Issachar. A donkey is a chamor. A lot of people, I have trouble with saying Het effectively. I still need practice at it. But that's the best I can do. This is donkey is a chamor. And I thought it was appropriate, since we talked quite a bit about Simeon and Levi and their violence against the city of Shechem, where they put every man of Shechem to the sword, to learn the word for sword, which happens to start with a Het, and it's Kerev. Kerev. And if you look here, you see here's the Het. Okay. And this is a resh. And what about this one? You know this one. This is one of our earlier ones. It would be a bet, which would make it kerev, reb, but it doesn't have the dot here in the middle. Really draw it. There we go. That would make it a bet. So it has the V sound. It's a vet. So rev. Okay. And I thought I would put this slide back up, which we just said just a little bit ago. Hasak, Kazak, Venik, Hasek, which has a lot of hets in it. So I thought I would point those out for you. You have one right here, kind of turning it from white to blue. Okay. You have another one right here. That's that hard CH sound, like at the end of bach. Bach. Okay. Now, you might be tempted. There's another one right here. And you might be tempted to say, oh, here's one right here. But it is not. Notice it's just a little bit different right here on this part. And that makes it a different letter. That is not a Het. So you have to be careful and make sure you look carefully at the letters. Okay. And here's some instructions about how to make the Het. And I'm sure Miss Kathy has some sheets for you where you can practice making this letter. This particular author says that the first stroke overhangs the vertical second stroke. So you see it's got a little pointy part off to the left at the top. But I have seen many examples of a Het that does not have that part. But I believe that the practice sheets that Miss Kathy gave you does draw it this way. So now it's time to enjoy the activity sheets that Miss Kathy has prepared for you. I do have another assignment, so hopefully you're listening careful right to the very end, because the next time you're at Goshen Acres, I'm going to ask you about this. Okay, are you ready? You're going to have a sheet in your activities for this section that has all the pictures of the tribes. You know, the lion for Judah and the flower for Reuben, okay? Now, somewhere at Goshen Acres, there is another place where pictures and banners of the tribes are displayed. Do you know where that is? Now, when you figure that out, I want you to take your sheet and compare the pictures that are on your sheet to the pictures that are on that are displayed at Goshen Acres. And I want you to tell me which ones are different. Which ones are different than the pictures that we gave you on the activity sheets. Okay? So you take your sheet, you compare it to the banners that are on display at Goshen Acres, and be able to tell me which ones are different. All right. Thanks for joining me for this session of Torah Portions and Precept Steps.